Who here has a parent or both parents with diabetes or grandparents? Just raise your hand. You know what? Let me raise my hand right away. I have 2 uncles, 4 aunts with diabetes. My father didn't get a diabetes as of now. Something must have been different, right? He was able to skip that generation and not develop a diabetes. So, is it possible to prevent this pre-diabetes or diabetes? Definitely. Now we come to what is diabetes. It's a metabolic disease. It is a disease of lifestyle illness, right? It is a disease because you have changed your lifestyle in a way that your body can't cope up, say 10 years, 20 years down the line. And it has went into this pathological state of diabetes. Now, do you have symptoms when you're diabetic? Diabetes will not produce much of a symptom till it starts damaging the organs in a completely irreversible way. That means initial phases, a diabetic will have absolutely no symptoms. That is why the recommendation is, especially if you have anybody in your family with a diabetes, your father, mother, your siblings, your grandparents, you are an adult in this country with this family history, you should be getting your sugar checked pretty much every year, because this is a disease which is not gonna cause much of a symptom. Even when you're pre-diabetic, there are not that many symptoms, rather no symptoms whatsoever. It's always a lab diagnosis. You develop the symptoms with the diabetes already raging in the body. So those symptoms are where you're going to be thirsty all the time. You're going to keep drinking a lot of water, but you're still going to remain thirsty. You're going to pee out a lot of urine, almost 5 liters, because you're drinking 5-6 liters throughout the day. You're always going to be hungry. That is your polyphagia. And you're still not picking up that weight. So these are the symptoms of a diabetes which is already out of hand. And this is where you're going to need a lot of medical help. Right? So diabetes in general, you have to remember, even for the treatment of the diabetes, it's not the medication alone that's going to do the trick. Unless you change the way you live, unless you modify your lifestyle, you're not going to get the results that you're looking for. India is a diabetes capital of the world. We have to step back and understand, look, this disease hasn't been brought around just in the 1990s. Okay? Even Egyptian mummies, they were found with organ damages, which can say, okay, this may have been coming from diabetes. So this is an ancient disease, right? Initially, it was a disease of excess. It was always the disease of excess rather, but it was only limited to people who have lots of resources. Now, if I look at the data, what was the diabetes doing in India in say 1960s and 1970s? So we were close to 3%, 3.2%. That means out of 100 Indians, adult Indians that we take, only 3 would possibly have a diabetes. You come to 1990s, and the number has jumped to 5.5. So this is a big jump. It's almost double, right? From 1990 to 2016, now we are talking about almost 8%. And the data which was recently released by the ICMR, Indian Council of Medical Research, says in 2020, adult Indians, out of 100, there is a good chance 9 of you will have diabetes. A very recent publication, again by the Indian Council of Medical Research, basically suggests if you're above 50, your chances of having a diabetes at this point is 11 out of 100, 11%. And this rise, this sharp rise is not stopping. It's going to continue, and it is expected to reach almost 16.5% and even higher within next 20 years. That's a frightening rise of one disease itself. Now, look at India 50 years ago. Very agriculture-based economy. That means everybody was physically working pretty much throughout the day. It was a very manual work. Whatever work you were involved in, it was a very manual work. A very tiny subsection of the society was actually sitting down and earning their living that way. The diet was mainly grains, vegetables and fruits, mainly whole grains. There was barely any maida in that diet. Now, that is where the diabetes rate was 3 and lower. 1990, We move forward by almost 30 years. Now we're gonna starting to cross 5%. What is changing? More urbanization. People are moving from rural to the urban areas. That means different kinds of work. More people sitting down. Less people working throughout the day. The diet is starting to change. More prepackaged food, more processed food now coming into the system. Now, this is 2023. Look at what is around us. Look at how many facilities, how many restaurants are there which are selling you a pre-packaged or pre-made meals. Definitely way higher. Look at what kind of activity we do, just as an individual. And look at around you. If you work in an office, everybody is sitting down for hours at a time. Where do you think all this processed food combined with absolutely not much of physical activity is going to lead us? That is why we are on the escalator. That is why the diabetes is going to go all the way to 16% and higher in the next 20 years. It's one disease that can literally has a power to cripple not just a person, not just a family, not a society, but an entire nation. That is why there has to be so much focus on preventing these diseases from happening in the first place. So we will focus on the nutrition because remember, this is a modifiable disease. As long as you change your lifestyle, you change the lifestyle, you change the outcome of what is going to happen to you and your body. You have to understand what we eat have consequences to our body. Not just today, but tomorrow and even 20, 30, 40 years down the line. You want to live a healthier life for a much longer and maintain that quality of life. It is important to understand the basics of what the carbohydrates are because they all get a pretty bad rep. It is important to understand how the body processes the carbohydrates. It's important to understand what hormones are important when it comes to digesting your carbohydrates. Then we'll think about, okay, if the normal process doesn't go normally, right, what pathological problems are going to arise, like insulin resistance, leading to prediabetes, leading to diabetes, and then the diabetes complications itself. So this talk is all about everything related to sugar and diabetes. Carbohydrates, right, carbs as they're known as, or just sugars, they all get pretty bad rap, right? Because whenever we think about carbohydrates, we only think about simple sugars, your chini in your home. But that's not what all the carbohydrates are about. What you think about when I talk about carbohydrates, it's that simple sugar. Your sugar that is available in your jar, in your kitchen, the white sugar or the jaggery. But beyond those simple sugars, there are starches which are found in the whole grain, fruits and vegetables. This is basically a simple sugar. Put it in the chain. Your body has to break up all these chains. That means it has to spend more energy to actually get those simple sugar out. That means it's going to take a longer time to digest. Third thing is a fiber. Fiber is a very complex carbohydrate. Most of it, your body really can't digest. But what it's going to offer you is the bulk. That means you're going to be more fuller. Your appetite is going to be suppressed for a little longer time than usual. And it's going to make it very difficult for the body to actually get all these simple sugar absorbed. Now, how much carbohydrate do we really need throughout a day? So remember, this all depends upon who you are, your gender, your physical activity, and what you do not do when it comes to the physical activity. So, on an average, a 70 kilogram man, okay, I'm only talking about 70 kilogram man because that is the data that we have, who's consuming, say, 2000 calories in a day. So, those calories need to be met with at least 45 to 65% of those calories need to come from carbohydrate. The rest of it can come from fat and the protein. This basically calculates into 275 grams of carbohydrates. Remember, I'm talking about carbohydrates. I'm not talking purely of a simple sugar that we talked about. The more the simple sugar, the more the trouble down the line. So 275 of total carbohydrates. That is how much you need for you to be sustaining your organs, your body, as a 70 kilogram man who's consuming 2000 calories in a day. Remember, carbohydrates is your best and efficient source of energy. So every cell in the body requires these carbohydrates, requires this sugar. A fun fact, do you know your brain exclusively needs glucose? So that is one of the reasons not to go on a really low carb diet to begin with, because your brain can only think if it has sugar. And the reason we get hangry is because your brain has sensed the sugar has gone low, and the only way it responds is irritability. So that is why we are angry when we are hungry. It's the sugar that's telling the brain what to do. Now let's think about how does a body processes all the carbohydrates that we take. You actually have enzymes that can digest this carbohydrate, this simple sugar, right from your mouth. Now your food is going to get into your stomach. It's going to mix with an acid, and this is where it's going to start the process of breaking down the sugars into the simple sugars, because that is the only form which your body can absorb into the blood. The sugar is going to start traveling to your brain. That is where all your sensors are. So your brain is going to say, you know what? The sugar in my blood is rising. I need to do something to control the sugar in a very narrow range. Right? So whenever the sugar rises, your hormone in the body, which is called as insulin, which is made in the pancreas, is going to start rising. Now you have finished your meal and the sugar is starting to basically plateau. Your brain has sensed that, and the brain has said to pancreas, time to switch off that insulin production because my sugar is now really well controlled. Now, after 3 hours, after you have had that meal, your body needs the sugar, right? It cannot go without a sugar. Your brain will shut down. Right? So where does it get that sugar from? Remember the stores we talked about? That it gets stored in the liver as well as in the muscles in the form of a long chain of a glucose called as glycogen. So there's a hormone called as glucagon, which tells your liver, which tells your muscle, okay, it's time to get that stores into the blood. That is how you and me can maintain that sugar level perfectly normal. And remember, there is not just two hormones. There is a list of hormones that are required for a sugar metabolism. But these are the two important. Insulin, your sugar is high, the insulin is going to get all that extra sugar in the blood going into the blood cells, going into the cells of body rather. And then when the sugar goes low, your insulin production shuts down and your glucagon starts going up. This yin and yang of two big hormones in the body is responsible for maintaining your sugar in a range which is absolutely normal for you. Glycemic index. So what is really a glycemic index? Glycemic index, think of it this way. It is a number which is given to every food item to essentially tell you how easy or how difficult it is for your body to extract the sugar from it. So lower the number, the better it is for your body. Glycemic index have been assigned from 0, where there is absolutely no sugar in that food, to 100, which is like a pure glucose, which is 100. That means your body can just quickly get it straight into the blood. So the number below 55 is what you're looking for, usually. But the number closer to the hundreds is what is not good for your health, especially in the long term. Because this is where most of your processed foods are going to be. And the lower the number is this is where your unprocessed foods are going to be. That means the fruits, right? Your vegetables, your whole grains. This is what is sitting on the left side. While your cakes, your ice creams, your burgers, your pizzas, this is what is sitting on the right side. And now that becomes a problem. Now look at a very staple breakfast of India. Rather, I'm pretty sure it's a staple across the India when it comes to the working people. Poha, such an easy to make. Made from the rice, but at the same time, look at the glycemic index. It's below 50. Question is why? Because of the way the rice has been processed. The starch granules are so unorganized that the body requires a little bit more help to digest this poha, which means you're going to be fuller for a lot longer. So poha is a fantastic breakfast, even if you're a diabetic. Now we looked at how a food gets digested, how a carbohydrate gets digested, right? We looked at how the insulin and glucagon is required to maintain that sugar level, especially in a very narrow range, where the sugar is always available to every cell in the body. Now another buzzword, which is insulin resistance. So what is really an insulin resistance? So just to simplify this a little bit is, if you ate this 1 mug worth of a carbohydrate and my body requires a teeny bit of an insulin to digest this protein. We looked at how the carbohydrates get digested in the body. We looked at the role of the insulin, we looked at the role of the glucagon, and their combined effort to keep that sugar level in a very narrow range. The role of the insulin is basically it's going to help all the cells, it's going to tell all the cells to open the door to get that extra sugar into the cell. So it's not floating around in the blood. Now what happens when the cells stop listening to the insulin? So that is the condition which is called as insulin resistance. So if I eat this big of a rice bowl, right? I used to require this much of an insulin when I was younger. Say 10 years down the line, I'm eating the same amount of rice, but my body needs to make a little extra insulin. That means my cells are getting resistant to the insulin. That means they're not really obeying what the insulin is trying to tell them. So the way the body has figured out is, let me make more insulin, right? So that is your insulin resistance. This is your first pathological step towards pre-diabetes and diabetes. This is a stage, believe it or not, is going to last 5 to 10 years before somebody gets diabetes. So this entire 5 to 10 years, what you are is a pre-diabetic. If you really look at the numbers, when it comes to say the hemoglobin A1C, hemoglobin A1C is a number which is very important as a doctor because it tells me not just a one-time number, but it is an average of 3 months worth of what your sugar has been doing in the body, right? How high, how low, or how normal your sugar has been for the last 3 months. What a fantastic insight into the body with just one blood test. So anybody who has that number below 5.6, you're normal. Those are your almost 85% of the people. Anybody whose number is above 6.5 is a diabetic at this point. So what are these people in between? 5.7 to 6.4. These are your pre-diabetics. And the question is, why am I worried, or why you should be worried with these numbers? The reason is, first of all, anybody who's sitting in between those numbers, your chances of getting diagnosed with the diabetes are extremely high only in the next 5 years. That's it. 5 years is what it takes you from diagnosed with a pre-diabetes to diabetes if you do not change anything in your life, especially your lifestyle. Do you know who is at a risk for developing a pre-diabetes? So the first thing you should look at is your family. If your mother, your father, your siblings, that means your sisters and brothers, or even your grandparents on both sides, mother's side as well as your dad's side, if they have diabetes, that's your first risk factor, that it runs in your family. Second thing, if you're overweight, the more the weight you have, the more the fat cells. The more the fat cells, the less they're going to listen to the insulin, the more the insulin resistance. That's where that connection comes from. Third thing, if you were pregnant before and during the pregnancy, your doctor told you, you know what, your sugar has been abnormally high. So that sugar goes back normal when you deliver, everything is peachy, but your body has shown that it is definitely capable of turning into the diabetes. So that is another risk factor. Women or the girls who have PCOS or PCOD, insulin resistance. So these are your risk factors, right? And as a South Asian, we all are in this continent, in this country. We have already shown that we have the highest numbers of diabetics in the world. So just by living in this country, eating the food that we eat and the genes that we have, we are already at a high risk. So these are the factors which is going to mean you can have a pre-diabetes. If you have family history, while during the last pregnancy, if you've had a sugar issues or anybody with the PCOS or PCOD, if you have any one of these, get yourself tested. This is the phase which is your golden opportunity. This, as a doctor, is a golden opportunity because this is the only stage where I can reverse this disease. You want to turn this thing around? This is your time. This is your opportunity. Because this is the phase where diabetes can be absolutely reversed, But after you cross the 6.5, that means you have given that sugar enough time to do the damage. So I can make the number look good from 6.5 to below 6.5, but the damage it has done in 10 years will take a long time to heal. But not when it comes to the pre-diabetes, because you're catching it early, you're treating it early, and you're changing your things. So there are surprising things that can spike your sugars beyond, say a processed food. One is stress. What stress does to the body, it puts the body in a fight or a flight mode, which means your body is gonna secrete cortisol, something that you need, right? It's the same hormone which is gonna get secreted if I put you in a lion's cage, because you are in only two minds. Either I'm gonna fight or I'm gonna flight, which is I'm gonna run. Stress in a shorter duration isn't gonna do much of a damage, but the stress over the period of a long time, this is what's gonna affect the way your body responds to everything, the way your body even processes the food, and that is where you're getting your sugar spike. Second thing, lack of sleep. There's a research data which is from the people who work through the night shifters, right? So especially in the hospital, because we used to have 1/3 of our staff working overnight. These are the people which will always complain about, I cannot lose weight. Question was why? So that is what the researcher looked at. And it turns out, just because you're going against the body's rhythm, body's clock, your body's hormonal systems is in a complete imbalance. This is also where your sugar spike is coming from. So very surprising, your sleep and your sugar spike. But there is a concrete connection to it. If you like that morning joe or a cup of coffee, what is the coffee going to do to you? You're going to say, you know what? I drink a coffee which is completely a black coffee. I don't even add a creamer. I don't even add any sugar. Why would my sugar have anything to do with it? Turns out a very tiny portion of population is actually more sensitive to the coffee. And then this in itself can lead to a sugar spike, even though you would think there's absolutely no relation. But remember, I'm talking about a very tiny portion of people. For all your health conscious people, who have been sort of switching away from the natural sugar to the artificial sweeteners, all your carbonated drinks will have artificial sweeteners. You're thinking, okay, can I get away from eating the sugar and just giving me the taste? Turns out you can't really fool your body for that long of a period. A study done in USA suggested people who ended up drinking Diet Coke or say a Diet Pepsi actually ended up gaining weight in a long period of time, because initially they thought, you know what, I'm going to fool my body. But when you fool your body, the body isn't getting the glucose it expects, the sugar it expects. It is only getting the taste. So the next meal that you have, your body is going to crave for that sugar. So you're going to overcompensate and eat something that you should not have had. So this is how artificial sweeteners and the body interact. This is how those artificial sweeteners are responsible for a spike in the sugar level. My fifth point is skipping the breakfast. You skip your breakfast and then you have the next meal. What your body is going to do? What it's going to think is, I have missed my previous meal. I don't know where my next meal is coming from. So let me get as much of a sugar out of this meal possible. This is where the sugar spikes. And now it's working overdrive to digest as much sugar as is possible. So skipping a meal or skipping a breakfast is usually not a good idea. So most of this country lives in a temperate zone. That means pretty much 300 days out of a 365, we live in a temperature 30 degrees Celsius and above. It's especially true in Mumbai or any coastal area. What it does is it puts us in a constant state or constant fear of dehydration. Every time the volume of the blood goes down, your sugar is going to concentrate in your blood. So dehydration in itself isn't going to spike your sugar level, but it's going to make it look like as if it has spiked. So pay attention to the hydration. That's very important. How much water should you be really drinking in a day? Our body has a fantastic way of understanding how much it needs and how much it can get let go of. So we drink water, right? And we lose it through three different sources. One is we pee it out, other is we sweat, and the third thing, which is surprising, is we almost lose half a liter just by breathing. Because if you hold a mirror in front of your nose, it's going to fog up. That's your evidence that it has a lot of moisture. So almost half a liter a day just by breathing. So clearly that is how much we need to replace to begin with, right? So on an average we pee around 1 liter, 1.5 liters. So that becomes a total of 2 liters in a day. And if you live in a coastal area in India, anywhere, you know how high the humidity is. You're going to be sweating 24/7 unless you are in an air-conditioned environment. So a good number to start with is usually 2.5 liters and plus. Again, it depends upon how much time you're spending outdoors, how much time you're spending indoors, how big of a person you are. That means how much is your weight, right? Your surface area itself, right? What kind of a work are you involved in? If you're involved in a very manual labor, you know you're going to sweat a lot. You go to the gym, you sweat a lot. So 2.5 is a good number to start with, and you can keep on adding up depending upon what your activity is. Your body will tell you when to stop. Now, how do we treat and cure prediabetes? First thing, look at what you eat, your nutrition. It's about what in your plate. So if you look at what an ideal plate should look like, right? It should be full of vegetables, your cooked vegetables, any kind of vegetables. It should also have some salad into it. And believe it or not, a fresh fruit. And this should be half of your plate. Your plate should also have protein. So the easiest way to remember how much protein you need with each meal, pick up your right hand, and this is your right palm, and this is the thickness of the protein that you need with each meal. It's the easiest way to remember. And how much carbohydrate do you need? Make a fist. This is the portion of the rice I should be eating with each meal. I would never talk about eliminating the rice. I would always say, moderating it. Always remember, your food should be different every day, every other day, if it's possible for you. Right? Because every color that is represented in your plate represents a different combination of vitamins and minerals, macronutrients, micronutrients. So your body needs a ton of nutrients. And it always benefits when your sources of food are different. Now look at the protein. Why those proteins are so important? Why the salad here is so important? Why is the fresh fruit so important? So a recent study basically suggests even changing the order what we eat is going to make sure the sugar isn't going to spike as much as it should the way we used to eat. Now the first thing you should be starting the diet with or your food with is either protein or your salad. Fill the stomach with the protein and with your salad. Your salads are going to add bulk. You're going to be less hungry and for a longer duration of the time. Same thing happens with the protein. The last thing you're coming back to should be your carbohydrate. This way, by the time you get to the carbohydrate, you're already 70% full. That means you're not going to overeat. You're not going to get the second portion. Because most of your second portions are not your subsies. They are mainly your carbohydrates. So when you start your diet with fiber, protein, what it adds is add bulk to the food. Your stomach is going to be fuller much earlier. Before even you ask for that extra serving of the rice, your stomach is already telling you, I think I had enough food. That means you're going to eat less. You're going to be fuller for a much longer time because your body can't digest fiber and it takes a longer time to digest protein. So these two benefits. What it means with the fiber is it's going to hold on to that sugar into the food that you have eaten and it's not going to let go that easily. That means rather than getting that sugar spike, your sugar is going to get absorbed pretty slowly into the blood. So these are very beneficial effects of fiber as well as the protein. So if you're not going to get enough fiber through your regular meals, what are my other options? Your options is there are fibers. There are supplements available with the fibers in them. You just have to look up because this is a ready-made fiber for you. Remember, every time you take extra fibers, you gotta drink more water. Fiber likes water. If you don't drink water, you're going to be constipated. Now the question is, how does protein, your weight, and your prediabetes and diabetes have in common? How do they really affect each other? So, protein in your diet, it's a building block. Remember, it's not just to build your muscles, but it is important for your enzymes, your hormones. Those are your building blocks. With those proteins, the more muscles you make, the better it is for your sugar metabolism. Your muscles can utilize the sugar much faster other than the brain. So, protein, that. Next thing is, how does it control the weight? Again, simple a mechanical effect. One is you are much fuller. You feel fuller, so you're going to tend to eat lesser of a carbohydrates. That means the sugars are not going to spike anymore. So, if you continue to eat a higher protein diet, this definitely down the line, you're going to see some weight changes, especially in a positive way. Now, how does this tie up into pre-diabetes and diabetes? The higher the weight, especially we are talking about the individuals who are overweight or obese, your chances of insulin resistance are much higher. Because insulin resistance really starts in the fat. So the more you accumulate, the difficult it is for your body to do what it needs to do. To maintain a weight in a very ideal way is really a building block for a better lifestyle modification when it comes to controlling and rather preventing and curing the pre-diabetes and very effectively managing the diabetes. So think about protein when it comes to every one of your meals. Now, how do you get enough protein in the body on a day-to-day basis? Remember, just for the maintenance, do you know what we need? We need 0.8 gram of protein for every kilogram of you. That means if there is somebody who is 100 kilogram, you're going to need 80 grams of protein just for your maintenance. To give you an example, so if you're a vegan, tofu, chole, rajma, dals, they keep on picking up different sources. If you're a vegetarian, along with those, you're going to add paneer, yogurt. Then, if you're a non-vegetarian, you got eggs, you got chicken. Where do you get your proteins? If you are a vegan, your sources are a little bit limited, but remember, they are there. Tofu, rajma, chole, big things. Soya chunks are right there. You're a vegetarian. Now your palate is a little bit broader than the vegan. Now you can add proteins from the milk. Your paneer, your yogurt is right up there. You're a non-vegetarian. So along with all the vegetarian sources here, you can add eggs, fish and chicken. I'm staying away from the red meat. Your protein source has to be heart healthy. You cannot rely on a single source of protein every day. It has to be rotated because everything your body needs comes in a tiny bits and pieces along with the big macronutrients rather. So remember, even if you're a vegan, one day could be rajma, other day could be a tofu, next is the soya chunk, then the chole. Because you want to rotate these sources of protein. You want to give that body everything that is going to require. Same thing when it comes to the non-vegetarians. It cannot be a fried chicken because now you're going to add extra fat, especially the trans fat when you're going to fry that chicken, which is going to basically negate. It's basically going to get rid of all the benefits that your protein are going to get, and you're going to get all the bad effects of that frying thing. So chicken curry is fantastic. If you can broil the chicken, that is okay as well, but just don't fry it. Frying is what's going to get rid of those extra nutrients in there. So it's extremely difficult most of the time to incorporate that much of a protein in your diet to begin with, unless you're doing an extra effort. Now, there are sources which are beyond the food, right? We have all heard about protein powders. The sources would be whey, then there is a brown rice, then there is a pea. So if you're a vegetarian, you also have an option of green pea protein or the brown rice protein. Then whey protein. So whey protein is basically coming from the milk. It's a milk protein at the end of the day. Whey protein is a very dense protein that can fulfill those needs. Remember, some of the individuals, very minority of it, may be allergic to it, but unless you try, you wouldn't know which protein is going to sit there. Again, the goal is to fulfill the need, but also to rotate the sources of different proteins. You're going to try to make the big chunk of your protein requirement through your diet, and whatever you're deficient in, those numbers, you can fulfill it with the help of the protein supplements. Now, if you're a pre-diabetic or diabetic, right? You said, you know what, I have these powders. Now, can I take it? The first thing you should be looking at is the amount of the sugar you're going to consume with that scoop. So keep an eye on the added sugar with those proteins. The proteins are going to help, but the added sugars are not going to be beneficial if you already are a pre-diabetic or a diabetic. You can get those powdered protein, in a shake, or try to add into your recipe. Put it in the yogurt, put it in a chapati. Whichever way you can incorporate those proteins in your diet, it's going to be so much effective for you. We all love our laddus, kaju katlis, don't we? So, say if somebody likes to have that sweet at the end of their every meal, can it be replaced with a piece of a fruit at least half the time to begin with? One change, one tiny change at a time. It's going to do wonders for your body. Your body is going to thank you for doing that change. So 2 days ago, a friend of mine came in and he brought in a juice in a plastic cup. There was a plastic bag sitting with a coconut water. My question to him was, why the juice and why not the whole fruit? He's like, that's exactly what you're getting out of this plastic cup as well. So I literally had to sit him down and say, you know what? Wait, look at the fruit, what it has, and look at the juice that you brought, what it does not have. When you eat a whole fruit, what you're going to get is literally everything good in it. You're going to get macronutrients, right? Of course, you're going to get your carbohydrates. You're going to get your simple sugars, which is why it tastes sweet. You're going to get fiber along with it. So that simple sugar isn't going to be readily available for your body. It's going to have to work hard to absorb that sugar from that fruit. It's going to have macronutrients and micronutrients. It's going to have a combination of vitamins. It is going to have a combination of minerals. When you let go of all that fiber, you have been letting go of other nutrients. And plus, you're making that sugar very readily available for the body. So what's your body going to do with that juice? It's just going to spike your sugar. And instead, if you would have eaten this entire fruit, you would not have had that spike, and you would have gotten all the right benefits out of a simple, humble fruit. Second thing, when it comes to reversing or curing your prediabetes, exercise. But any form of exercise, jog, walk, run, do a Pilates, right? Do a yoga, or go to gym. Do anything which is beyond your regular routine. That is an exercise. So, do we have an evidence to back up that this is actually going to work? So yes, absolutely. Even American Heart Association basically suggests, and with the backup of an evidence, that 30 minutes, 5 times a week, a brisk walk is actually going to be beneficial. Not just reversing your disease, but decreasing the chances of you developing a heart disease. Now let's focus on getting that exercise into your regular routine. That is how it's going to stick, right? So what is the best way? What does science say is when is the good time to get myself active and make sure the sugar doesn't rise or sugar doesn't spike? What the evidence says, what the scientific evidence says is, you walk, within an hour of a meal, at least for 5 to 10 minutes. And I'm talking about meal. I'm not just saying lunch or dinner. I'm talking about every time you eat. Just 5 to 10 minutes within that hour. If you do that brisk walk, it will make sure that sugar is no longer spiking. It's just going to stay steady. What a wonderful benefit with just few minutes of your time into your routine. If you are that office worker that is always sitting down and busy with the meeting, after each meeting, go for a walk for 2 minutes. Take that stairs rather than the elevators. That is where you're going to be able to add those extra minutes. Because we want to get you to 30 minutes a day, at least 5 days a week. This cannot be just for 1 week. Third thing, sleep well. You have to get 6 to 8 hours of sleep every night, even if it's on the weekend. Late nights, your body doesn't like late nights, There's a reason why you wake up on a Sunday morning really groggy after a party in the Saturday night is because you have changed the schedule. Every time you put your body through the sleep off, sleep which is beyond your normal hours, you're going to change the hormonal cycles of your body. So sleep 6 to 8 hours at night. Fourth one, which is very tricky, is your mental health. Not tricky because it's difficult to diagnose or difficult to treat. It's tricky because we have to acknowledge the stress plays a part into the way I look or the way I am or how heavy I am or my disease. So acknowledgement comes first. Your stress levels are going to affect the levels of the hormones, and it's going to affect the way you process your food. It's going to affect your insulin resistance. 4 big things that can help you cure your prediabetes all by yourself without any help from any doctor. Remember, prediabetes or diabetes, these are not death sentences. Some of those changes are absolutely reversible. Diabetes is absolutely manageable. The goal is remembering this is a disease of a lifetime, but it doesn't have to cut your lifetime short. It doesn't have to be that your quality of life has been affected 20, 30 years down the line because now you have lost the vision or you're on a dialysis or you have had an amputation because of the circulation issues. So most of the treatment of the diabetes is actually in your hand. You gotta make those tiny changes we talked about. Make the tiny changes which have massive impacts 20 years down the line. I hope you like this HyugaLife Health Breakdown on the topics of sugar management, pre-diabetes, diabetes, and its management. I really hope you will do these lifestyle modification changes that I suggested and make a very positive impact on your own health. Thank you.